Good morning, everyone. This will be the 7th session of my reading of The Unseen Partner by Diane Croft. I just want to remind everyone at the beginning here that Diane Croft will be appearing live today with us at 2 p.m. There will be no recording of this session. So if you want to attend, you'll need to sign up beforehand. And I will be sending out one more notice on it. And so I'm putting on the YouTube chat the registration information. So please register before 11 o'clock U.S. Eastern Time, and then you will receive the final reminder about Diane's session, including her link. And as I say, it will be live only. There will be no recording or replay, and it will not be going out on YouTube. So if you want to be there, you have to be on the Zoom session. And also today, as I have been for the last 6 weeks, I'll be reading from Jerry Wright's book, A Mystical Path Less Taken. And as most of you know, Dr. Wright did appear with us last Sunday, and he did allow recording. And so his session with us is available on the homepage of the YouTube channel. Let's see. Okay. All right. So let's see what is going on here. Okay. Good morning, Art. Nice to see you today. And so let's see, where were we? I'm reading from The Unseen Partner, and I guess I will take my cloaking off so that I can show you these pages as they come up, because it's too irritating to have the virtual background interfering. So anyway, here's the book. Here's the first book we're reading today, The Unseen Partner, Love and Longing in the Unconscious by Diane Croft. And I'm on page 72. As I've said in previous weeks, Diane has structured her book in the following manner. She has, on each page, she has a topic. In this case, it's stone. The word is stone. And then, as you see, there is a poem and an image. And then on the facing page, there's a famous quote and Diane's commentary. And so I'll be reading these in tandem with Jerry Wright's book. And Jerry Wright's book is this one, Mystical Path Less Traveled, a Jungian Psychological Approach, Journal Notes, Poems, Dreams, Blessings by Jerry Wright. And so here we go. So the stone. Do not speak. I want to sink into the silence that is your hand. It holds me like an anchor drops to sleep inside coral reefs. Waves move as I sit perfectly still on this bench by your left side. And the image is stone bench in the Asylum of Saint Remy, 1889, by Vincent van Gogh. And here is Van Gogh's image here, stone bench. He was, as you probably know, he was in an asylum for the last few years of his life, but he was still doing all of his painting. And He very likely was not insane. Okay, the quote is from Rumi's Rightness is All, and here's his quote. Do not speak so that thou mayest hear from the speakers what cannot be uttered or described. And then Diane's commentary. Stone. There is no mention of stone in this poem. Yet when I Googled bench and Van Gogh's painting appeared, it felt right. Actually, this poem is one of submersion, what the alchemists referred to as Salutio, or pertaining to water. But unlike the earlier flood poems, I am not drowning, but peacefully falling to sleep. Things continue to move around me, but I am centered, and held in silence. Edinger describes 7 major interpretations of Salutio's symbolism. 1, return to the womb or primal state. 2, dissolution, dispersal, dismemberment. 3, containment of a lesser thing by a greater. 4, rebirth, rejuvenation, immersion in the creative energy flow. 5, purification ordeal. 6, solution of problems. And 7, melting or softening process. Unquote. If I consider the opening lines, do not speak. I want to sink in the silence that is your hand. I feel both containment and a melting. Quoting from Jung, by whatever names the philosophers have called their stone, they always mean and refer to this one substance, i.e., to the water from which everything originates and in which everything is contained, which rules everything, in which errors are made, and in which the error is itself corrected. Explains Edinger, the greater Salutio is an encounter with the numinosum, which both tests and establishes the ego's relationship to the self. As the flood myths tell us explicitly, the flood comes from God, that is, Salutio comes from the self. What is worth saving in the ego is saved. What is not worth saving is dissolved and melted down in order to be recast in new life forms. And then there's another quote from Edinger. When a true symbol is alive, it won't stand still for a single interpretation. Okay. So that's the first reading from Diane's book. And I think some of our fellow Americans are thinking that they're in the Salutio right now because they came to the Capitol on January the 6th, thinking that they were in the right, and now they're being dissolved by the greater. They're contained in the greater thing, which is our country, and they will emerge different, no doubt. Okay. Now, going back to Jerry Wright's book, I'm reading his journal entries, not his poems. As you probably saw last week, if you attended our session last week, Jerry's poems are quite evocative and very powerful, and I think that they should be read by him. And so you should go back and listen to that video to hear his poetry. Here's the journal entry for the first journal entry. The monotheistic God image has been too light, bright, and white, and the repressed opposites are demanding their rightful place, not only in the God image, but in culture and politics. This all good, all bright God image forces one to repress all the opposite energies out of sight into the unconscious. As Jung noted, these shadow elements do not disappear. The unconscious does not have a digestive tract that eliminates unwanted parts of ourselves. When the human shadow is ignored, it gains even more energy and power and manifests in destructive attitudes and behavior. We are witnessing a return of the repressed, of the sacred dark, or in alchemical language, the Negredo. America was founded and built on the backs of people of color, red, black, and brown, and legitimized by a perverted image of God and religious narcissism. The treatment of people of color was America's original sin that remains unrecognized, unowned, and unforgiven. Yeah, I think that's obviously a very powerful comment, and exactly right. And also it relates to what we saw in on January the 6th, which is the repressed, let's say, working class of the American people has been held back by our politics. They weren't Black people that were objecting at the Capitol on January the 6th. They were the people who thought they were middle class white people, but the reason that they they had finally been pushed into the background for so long, repressed for so long, that they had to act. And they were in many ways right about their dissatisfaction with what has been going on in the country. And I have been a part of that myself. And so I understand their complaint. And we have to correct it, but it's not going to be corrected by an authoritarian leader, because authoritarian leaders always lead to bad things, as we have seen. Okay, so the next session in Diane Croft's book is The Gift. That's the title of this section. And her poem is, "In the dream I meet you in a meadow. You bring me a gift, a circle of daisies woven by hand. Each laced stem binds the others. Each laced stem binds the others, forming a soft halo of white. You place on my head, warm now in the sun and the deep green grass." Try to read that a little better. "In the dream I meet you in a meadow. You bring me a gift, a circle of daisies woven by hand. Each laced stem binds the others, forming a soft halo of white you place on my head, warm now in the sun and the deep green grass." And the image is a painting of a daisy. It's a recursive image illustrating the Droste effect in 2006 by Alexandre Duret Lutz of France. This is the image. The quote is, "When the soul lies down in the grass, the world is too full to talk about." And that was Rumi in a translation by Coleman Barks. The Gift. So many poems speak of a dream state, which I take to mean in an unconscious state, i.e., in my unconscious. Here again arises a mandala image, a circle of daisies forming a soft halo of white. But my emotional focus in this poem rests on the image of the deep green grass. Drawing on his extensive study and interpretation of alchemical texts, Jung associated green with the color of the Holy Spirit, of life, procreation, and resurrection. Edinger reports that whenever he encountered a dream involving the color green, he would open a bookmarked page in Jung's Mysterium, what Edinger named the Blessed Greenness page. And here's the quote from that page. The state of imperfect transformation, merely hoped for and waited for, does not seem to be one of torment only, but of positive, of hidden happiness. It is the state of someone who, in his wandering among the mazes of psychic transformation, comes upon a secret happiness which reconciles him to his apparent loneliness. In communing with himself, he finds not deadly boredom and melancholy, but an inner partner. More than that, a relationship that seems like the happiness of a secret love, or like a hidden springtime, when the green seed sprouts from the barren earth, hiding out the promise of future harvests. It is the alchemical Benedicta Viriditas, the blessed greenness, signifying the divine spirit of life in all things. O blessed greenness, which generates all things, cries the author of the Rosarium, for to be green means to grow. Now, I would just add to that through this period that we've come through, the COVID period, we've all been cooped up in our houses quite a lot, and I have especially noticed when I step outdoors, I just feel this wonderful feeling of, that nature lives and nature goes on. Our Mother Earth is still out here, and I feel the sense of the natural world when I step outside, and it's a very serious pleasure. As Rumi says, the world is too full to talk about, and I'm sure you feel it too as you go out or go swimming. I always like when I go swimming in the summertime, and I haven't been able to do that for 2 years. I like just going under the water and just holding my breath and just being in suspended animation. I can only hold that pose for maybe a minute because I can't hold my breath that long, but it's really a special moment for me always. Okay, returning to Dr. Wright, Mystical Path Less Traveled. I'm on page 37, and I think I better read what I read before, because I realized I missed a paragraph. It carries on to the next page, and I didn't include it. So let me read it once again. The monotheistic God image has been too light, bright, and white, and the repressed opposites are demanding their rightful place, not only in the God image, but in culture and politics. The all-good, all-bright God image forces one to repress all the opposite energies out of sight into the unconscious. As Jung noted, these shadow elements do not disappear. The unconscious does not have a digestive tract that eliminates unwanted parts of ourselves. When the human shadow is ignored, it gains even more energy, and the power and manifests in destructive attitude and behavior. We are witnessing a return of the repressed, of the sacred dark, or in alchemical language, the Negredo. America was founded and built on the backs of people of color, red, black, brown, and legitimized by a perverted image of God and religious narcissism. The treatment of people of color was America's original sin that remains unrecognized, unowned, and unforgiven. Now here's the paragraph I left out. Yet soul will tolerate nothing less than wholeness and will protest through a variety of personal and collective symptoms. The symptoms will not be alleviated by passing more laws or by a mere change of political leadership. We must uncurse the darkness, beginning with how we image God and religion that determines the way we relate ourselves, others, and nature itself. So this is Dr. Wright's prescription. Yet soul will tolerate nothing less than wholeness and will protest through a variety of personal and collective symptoms. The symptoms will not be alleviated by passing more laws or by a mere change of political leadership. We must uncurse the darkness, beginning with how we image God and religion that determines the way we relate ourselves and others and nature herself. So let me give you a metaphor for this in terms of January the 6th. In my town of Annapolis, we have a ice cream stand that's very popular because their ice cream is fresh and many different flavors, and in the summertime it's really good to go to this ice cream stand. But my wife and I realized that on January the 6th, the owner of that ice cream stand had organized 6 buses to go to our previous president's insurrection against the people of the United States. And we were very upset by that and decided, okay, we're going to boycott this ice cream stand and not go there anymore. But yesterday, I have to admit that ice cream took precedence over our resolve to boycott the ice cream stand, or we could say we decided to redeem the owner because she has good qualities too, namely very good ice cream. And we all have to find a way to redeem our country, our whole country, every single soul in our country. And that means every person of color, and it means every religion, and it means all things that are American. We can't define that we can't define what it means to be an American in terms of color or in terms of religion, national origin, or any other such thing. We are all of those. We represent in the United States the entire human family. And by and large, we do live together peacefully. And so when we watch our televisions, we often rue the fact that, oh, if this person would do such and such and so on, things would be better. Well, they're already pretty good in the United States. I mean, even with COVID-19, we live together in peace by and large. We do have eruptions. It's not a perfect place, but there is no place that is perfect. And so we have to keep working at it. It's something that's a never finished project because we have younger generations coming along who begin as wild animals when they're born. We have to teach them how to be in society, and we have to recognize that we do have repressions. We have repressed people in many ways, and we need to release those repressions. And that means recognizing the hurts of everyone. And yes, there were white hurts that came to full manifestation on January the 1st or 6th, because those people have been ignored by all politicians for 30 or 40 years. The American Rust Belt used to be a very valuable aspect of our national economy, but politicians and business executives ignored it. So a lot of people were struggling in those states, and they're angry. And so we have to recognize that and try to bring them jobs and bring them a better standard of living. That's all. Good morning, everyone. So Coleman said there have been no violent protests from the right in recent history. I doubt he knew the intentions of some. You can't blame a patriot for actions of a few. Well, that's right. And I think that a lot of people that were at that demonstration were genuine patriots that thought that they were doing the right thing, but they got swept up in a psychic epidemic, and we have to understand that. And obviously, we can't allow violations of our laws, because that's how we do have civilization. We can't. It's not just, oh, it was just a morning lark and we're all going to go home and be peaceful people now, when murders have taken place. And so people who have committed crimes have to be corrected for those crimes. But that doesn't mean that they're unredeemable. They probably are redeemable, but they have to see the world a little bit differently from the way they have been. And Savage Sapien says, yes, even ice cream isn't safe from the corruption of politics. Sad. And hello, Rudra. Coleman says, there have been no violent protests up until January 6th, to my knowledge, we can talk about. Well, I mean, there are violent eruptions from time to time. Who's responsible? There's blame to go around. There's enough to go around, and the person who is leading our country was fanning those flames, and hopefully we're past that now. And Patrick says, stop watching the news. We're doing much better than people realize. Amen to that. I agree entirely. We must all take our place in society. Skip is teaching young professionals, and that as us young professionals help the children, this is how it works. Right. We have to help people understand that, things do come apart from time to time. They're way better than they were during my youth, during the 60s, let's say, when we had both the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement going. There was a lot of violence in that time, and a lot of it was political violence, but nothing that today's violence that we see is nothing compared to those times. It's very small potatoes compared to those times. And so we have improved. We are improving. It requires our attention. Let's see. I have somebody joining me. And hopefully he will appear. Hello, Dick. Welcome. Thank you for joining me this morning. Okay, I'm going to move on from that lovely topic to Diane's next page. I'm on page 76 of The Unseen Partner, and the topic for page 76 is exotica. Exotica. And here's Diane's poem. This part of me that does not succeed, does not think clearly, cannot remember your name. This part of me must be given a chance to breathe the same air as the horns blowing through my coronation. I possess the memory of pollen. Why do I care to remember your name? I have emptied myself of you. You are everywhere. And okay, let me read that once again. That's quite a nice poem. This, and it's in 3 identified verses here. Oops, there. 3 verses. Verse 1. This part of me that does not succeed, does not think clearly, cannot remember your name. This part of me must be given a chance to breathe the same air as the horns blowing through my coronation. 2, I possess the memory of pollen. Why do I care to remember your name? 3, I have emptied myself of you. You are everywhere. And the image that she's chosen is Erica Massoni, Delineations of Exotic Plants from 1776 to 1803 by Franz Bauer, Austria. So here's the plant that she's showing us. Okay, for Exotica. And then the quote, I am the plant of life. It's a text that's on an Egyptian coffin, and it's from R.T. Rundle Clark, Myth and Symbol in Ancient Egypt. And then Diane's commentary. Exotica. This part of me that does not succeed, does not think clearly, is another reminder to accept my weaknesses no less than the horns blowing through my coronation. Edinger reminds us that one cannot become a conscious human being without experiencing weakness and defeat over and over again. At birth, the unrealized ego is submerged within the greater self, a condition of undifferentiated bliss. Life then has its way with us, numerous bouts of success and defeat, which gradually gives birth to and fortifies or weakens ego consciousness. Either way, the ego develops its own center and forgets its connection with the transpersonal self within. If and when the ego becomes aware of its silent partner, it must be healthy enough to withstand an assault from some fairly wild and infantile archetypal forces. Some of these entities should be realized in actuality, while others should only be understood symbolically. Part 2 offers an arrogant counterpoint to my perfection-seeking personality. I possess the memory of pollen. Why do I care to remember your name? The plant symbolizes a primordial vegetative state or mode of life experience that has a reservoir that can take up destructive excesses of energy that may accumulate in the conscious personality. This happening is experienced by the conscious mind as miraculous, i.e., transcending the categories of conscious understanding, or as the Navajos say, "O beauty before me, beauty behind me, beauty to the right of me, beauty to the left of me, beauty above me, beauty below me. I'm on the pollen path." That's a good one. Good morning, Jordan. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you.
We got ahead of you a bit, but this passage that I just read relates to a fundamental point of Jungian psychology, which is that life must be undone, quote unquote. And what that means is that life is an unfolding. It's not turning us into machines. It's not learning how to be machines. It's learning what we are intended to become. Dr. Tamara says, yes, yes, train the youth and give them the support they need, but also listen to them really deeply. Yes, that's very important. And I think one of the things that I've always thought, and I've never been able to achieve it, it's very, very difficult for a parent, but when your children are under 5 years old, they say the darndest things, but what they're expressing are the shadow. I mean, they make you laugh. They're if you collected these things, if you haven't had children yet and you start to have children, please do this as they begin to talk from age maybe 15 months to 5 years. Every time they say something funny or profound, write it down. If you do that, if you do that, you will find that you have a bestseller on your hands. And go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to say just yes, definitely. I mean, I'm on the pollen path. It's like cook an omelet for Deb, and the thing is, with an egg, the protein unfolds when it cooks. It does not fold back. So that whole Jungian unfolding is like cooking an egg. You can't uncook an egg. And that experiential piece, especially when kids are under 5, that they say the darndest things. I mean, there's oh my God, look at my little wise man. You can learn because it's not just that, wow, you have no filter. There's a wisdom. And it's quite obvious, the wisdom that's just true.
Right. So anyway, I urge all my audience with your young children. Unfortunately, I have none of my own anymore, but I do have three grandchildren who are under 5, and one of them who is just 15 months old. So she's the one that we have to take dictation from. I have to remind my daughter to do this. But in any case, they often have profound insights that as adults we've lost track of. And so I very much urge you to write those things down because we need them. And in my youth, there was a famous television personality named Art Linkletter. And Art Linkletter had a program, which I forget whether this was the name of the program or just a part of his program every week, but it was called Children Say the Darndest Things. and he would have a panel of um, 3 to 5 kindergarten age children on the panel with their parents, and he would ask these children leading questions, and they would often say the darndest things. and he had quite a franchise on this, because I think he was on for, well, close to 10 years, certainly longer than 5. He was on so long that it got old, but it's still a very powerful thing. Gander says, I've had mind-blowing mystical experiences. Many people have shared their experiences with me. A big step in learning is sharing with one another. Simple anecdotes provide a wealth of wisdom. Absolutely true. And you should come to our Mark of the Self sessions with Colleen Kibert, because she's made a point of the fact that when you do something creative, you do have to share it with someone. That's part of the process. And she covered it last time. Unfortunately, it got a bit attenuated, so I did a separate interview with Colleen a few days ago, in which we just put the key points down in a very concise place. And I have not yet published that interview because I need to do some editing on it. But
I think that comment on that from YouTube is so key. The anecdotal is, to me, more important, honestly, than the research, because it's no amount of convincing, and it's amount of the experiential being expressed. Right. And I think a lot of people try to, I've read this and I've read that and I've read all of those, and in a sense try to sound brilliant instead of the anecdotal. The kids say the darndest things. So when we actually speak to one another and we share, I think there's honestly more wisdom often than even in the books we read, because definitely. I mean, because we're not just processing. I think we're beyond integrating. Yes. And then when we express it, we say the darndest things, less occasionally than someone under 5, but we still do.
Right.
To one another.
Yeah. And I'm just reading a book. I don't have it right here in front of me, so I'm not going to show the book, but the book is called Religious But Not Religious by Jason Smith. And Jason is a Jungian analyst up in Massachusetts. And, he talks about these things in that book, and about the need for understanding that we're unfolding. It's not a question of honing your skills down and becoming a good Marine or a good lawyer or a good MBA or a good any other such thing. It's what are you becoming? What is your life coming to, and understanding that, because you can, as I did, you can spend 3 years becoming a lawyer and then find out that when you're practicing law for 5 years, that you're dealing with everyone else's hardships, and it's not pretty. And so, I decided long ago, after 5 years of practice, that I didn't want to do that. In fact, I decided even faster. I just decided in 3 years. So then I went to business school, and thinking that I would go into business and that would be better. And it was indeed better. But in that school, that was 15 courses in statistics by different names. And what I found out when I got into business is that that I never once used a regression analysis or any statistical analysis
Right.
per se, none that you would run on a computer per se. I did use computers, but the hurly-burly of life and running a business is more like running a family. It's not like running a machine. And unfortunately, that approach that we've taken to MBA training has created two generations since Milton Friedman did his thing, Free to Choose. He actually made it unfree to choose. And the people that have been trained after his book are basically psychopaths. And so we need to undo that. And that's going to be a big project for a long time, because people that are trained as MBAs think that it's about how big the numbers are at the end of the quarter. And they pay no attention to the value of having relationships with people for a long time. And
yeah, I have to say, no one in architecture has ever asked me what the ancient medieval history says, or the Baroque says, or the Rococo says. No one in the tarot profession has ever asked me what this or that book says. They ask us questions, and they ask us questions directly. And I think communication is very anecdotal that way. We're not spitting rote back and forth. And you're so right about the psychopathy. I mean, the absolute lack of connection is so prevalent, and it's going to take a couple of generations, if addressed, to address it.
Yeah, maybe more than a couple of generations.
Yeah, I mean it's rampant.
I mean, when people were building cathedrals in the Middle Ages, they all had a relationship with one another and a relationship with God, and they all had a common purpose in that respect. And those buildings took 100 years to build, for the most part, with the exception of the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, which took 5 years. But
they were on it. They had a different way of thinking, right?
Right. And so, but the cathedrals of Europe, Chartres and Notre Dame, and those cathedrals took at least 100 years, and the Cathedral of Washington in that tradition took 100 years. And so those things were great bonding agents for societies in those days. And now we tend to be lone rangers mostly, although maybe if we get going on rebuilding our roads and bridges, there'll be common purpose again. I'm hopeful that that's true. Certainly it happened in the 50s, and that's why the 1950s, the late 40s and the 1950s were seen as a golden age, because at that time, people were coming out of war and they wanted community. And so they created these huge communities. Plus, we built the interstate highway system at that time, and there was community activity. But in that community activity, we also had a dark side that we hadn't addressed, which was the unequal treatment of our people of color in this country. And we still haven't addressed that adequately, obviously. And we need to continue to work on these things, because everybody who is in the U.S. can be an American, whether they are any race, creed, or color. or national origin. So we have people of national origin from every country in the world. And we're probably I don't know if we're the only country. Britain has a lot, but I think they mainly come from the Commonwealth, and the same with Canada. But in the United States, we literally have people from every nationality in the world, and they work as Americans. So if you go to the grocery store, you're not going to see a lot of animosity running around in the grocery store, no matter where you go in the country.
Right.
And you know, I don't know if we had things as bad as the George Floyd situation when I was young, because in those days we didn't have 7x24 news, and news was quite limited, only half an hour a day typically, and so, you know, we were just living our lives most of the time. But now every time there's an eruption of any kind, we're all there in that eruption, and we're experiencing it directly. And so it might feel much worse now, but actually it was much worse in the 60s and the, you know, the period before that, the Jim Crow South. All of that was much worse than we have today. And so we are improving. It's a slow process, but we are improving.
I think you brought up a great point with, I mean, the CIPs, capital improvement projects, now called shovel-ready projects. But it kind of speaks to this, Diane's, this part of me must be given a chance. And that part of this country has not been given a chance in a decade or more. And
way more
actually
than
2 decades. I mean, it just kind of petered out in the 70s. And CIPs for very progressive municipalities are actually one of the most progressive pieces. And for like Broomfield, Colorado, for example, that's CIPs are a primary part of their comprehensive plan.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of communities and most municipalities don't even know. If I said CIP, they wouldn't know what it meant. And, you know, that you'd have to go buy a shovel. They don't have one literally ready, so to speak. So I agree that, you know, for example, the interstate highway system, it's in replacement mode. Most bridges are in replacement mode. And I think as are we as a culture.
Yeah. So here's an interesting synchronicity that Jordan, you'll remember this, but, and I'm going to say hello to the party who call themselves Welcome to the Human Race. Hello. That's all they're saying. So anyway, but anyway, I want to address Gander Stein's comment here, and Jordan will remember why. I think he says, I've had experiences of synchronicity with the numerical combination of 1111, quite often the time 1111. I've mused upon this for years. I believe that this represents the continual juxtaposed evolution of the internal mind and external, what the mind perceives outside of itself. The external force is one of act. When that act is carried out, it then forces change in the external. The one on both sides of the colon eventually become an 11. Okay, well, that's a very interesting perspective. I have a direct experience with 1111. Again,
as do I, and I have to say too, as a former drummer, that's synchronizing with your own metronome of rhythm. I mean, I look at the clock 24 hours every day at 11:11. When I'm feeling on, when I'm really connected, I see 222, 333, 454, 555, 1111, and it's a master number for sure.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I notice on those days when I am clipping along, and it may be difficult, but I'm working in a way that's really effective. Anytime I look at the clock, even 12:34, I'm like, oh, I can learn to count 1, 2, 3, 4. There's some kind of meaning that gets attributed to that little visual. So I don't know if agree is the right word, but resonate with certainly is.
Well,
in your experience,
my experience was that in 1998, one of my daughters told me that she thought I was going to hell. And she was right, because I fell into hell at that moment. And I literally had a vision or experience of Mephistopheles on that evening after she said that. And this wasn't that evening, but shortly thereafter, I was in my bedroom and I'd gotten up in the middle of the night for a call of nature or something. And I had a big electric clock with big numbers on my nightstand. And I came in, and what I saw it said was hell in big orange letters. And what it actually was 1111.
right?
But I saw it as
the blur of how you saw it.
Yeah,
right?
because my vision isn't that red hot and so on, and I have astigmatism and so on. I literally saw the word hell, and so.
Well, yeah, that's like someone typing 7731 on a calculator and flipping it upside down, and oh look, is this hell? Can that, but yeah, I get it. Your eyes play the tricks, but you literally saw that. So
but that's a message. That's a message, right?
Right.
So anyway, okay.
Well, and I would say that's important that that's a message, not that you were mistaken, because the thing is, what you experienced was the primary anecdote there, not what actually was. Because between your astigmatism,
wait a minute, no, it actually was. Jordan.
Well, right. And that's what I mean. Your experience of what you saw, that's the important piece. Not the clock the clock may have said 1111.
Yeah.
But the calculus of your astigmatism, you're just waking up, your eyes starting to focus. That's a reality. And that's an experience to be listened to.
Yeah. So Max Frank says U.S. government is always terrorizing its people and brown people in other countries. Army scientists sprayed radioactive particles off buildings in St. Louis, mostly onto children, for years. Well, thank you, Max, but that's really not on our topic. So let's move on. Manuela, hi, Skip and Jordan. I started seeing 44 or 1144 and thought I was going nuts. Even my cell stopped working several times at that time. And Anders says, cool, Jordan, you play drums. I'm a guitar player. The phenomenon of life is vibration. Thanks for sharing your stories. Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Good.
Okay, moving on. So I'm back to Jerry Wright's book. And here's his journal entry. As Jung noted, one's true religion consists of where and how one invests her primary quantum of energy, rather than one's statement of belief. This applies to collectives as well as to individuals. From this perspective, a nation's budget is a moral document and therefore more revealing than coinage stamped with "In God We Trust." Yeah, no kidding.
What page are you on?
Page 37.
Okay.
So I'm right in the middle of the page. So one's true religion consists of where and how one invests his or her primary quantum of energy. And I would say that's absolutely true. And so you can see how I spend my quantum of energy on Sunday morning. Will have to say that it's my true religion, although my true religion involves many things. It involves Buddhist meditation. It involves the chapel at the U.S. Naval Academy and many other aspects of my true religion. So, but all of them relate to this idea of unfolding as opposed to becoming an instrument. For example, I've said many times, and I can say this because I still carry an ID card. The Marine Corps is a weapon belonging to the President of the United States, and it is indeed. We sharpen that weapon constantly, but there's no individuality there. If a Marine is ordered to do something, a Marine will do what he's ordered to do, and so you have to understand, if you're going into any armed force, let's say, you're becoming part of a weapon, and there's no individuality in that. But as the motto goes, the Marine Corps builds men. So if you want to have a quick and dirty experience of what it means to grow up, that's what it means.
Jerry Wright's statement of one's true religion consists of where and how one invests his or her primary quantum of energy. I remember one of my interns once saying, "How do we charge the clients so much money for these projects?" And I just turned and looked at her and I said, "We don't. We bill commensurate with the value that we build." And there was a different structure there where this wasn't high priced, it's commensurate with value. And so the where and how we invest our primary quantum of energy, that was the synergy of the architect and the client, of what we are building together. And which, like you said, with the military, it's constantly being sharpened. And when you're part of it, you're a piece of it.
Yep. And so then you can become an individual, and what your self wants you to be, you can unfold. But wars are fought by young men who still don't know up from down, and so. The captain of an aircraft carrier is typically 45 years old. So that's only half a life old, basically.
Right.
And so it's young people who fight wars. And so, for better or for worse, that's the way it is. But after you fight a war, then you have to learn how to live. Now I'm just being bemused because outside my window is a deer. I don't know if you can see this, but there's a deer that is munching on the left, tree. Right? Yeah, right there. See that deer going by? We have several families of them.
They're not something to mess with. They look cute, but you get up front and you get a couple of these going with the deer, and you better not be in front of them.
Yeah, that's right.
They're pretty amazing. They're little warriors.
Yeah, but this deer is definitely munching on that tree.
Oh, that's cool. Well, that's a piece of unfolding right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, okay, so the next section for Diane's book is Skylight. And I should mention again, since we have a bigger audience now, that Diane Croft is appearing with us live today at 2 p.m. And the session will not be recorded and it will not be on YouTube. So if you wish to hear Diane speak live about experiences of God in the individuation process, you need to physically be there live with us on Zoom at 2 p.m. And if you
2 p.m. Eastern, right?
Yeah, 2 p.m. U.S. Eastern time. And if you want to have the links for that, you have to register on our YouTube, I'm sorry, on our MailChimp list. And the link for that is contained at the beginning of the YouTube chat today. And so I can probably put it in once again. Let's just see if this works. If I still have it on. Yep, there it is. Okay, so there's the link again. And if you haven't registered on that link, you need to. And then one more time before Diane appears, probably around 12 p.m. or 12 noon U.S. Eastern time will be the last reminder I sent out with the coordinates. So if you want to you want to see Diane Croft live and you want to ask her questions about her experiences of God in the individuation process, please be there at 2 p.m. U.S. Eastern time today. Okay, so the next section is called Sky-like, and there's the topic. And the poem is, as you see me, I can fly soaring around the room on parchment paper wings, old and yellowed but light in flight, looking down on those who live without knowing this. As you see me, I can fly. And that reminds me of the session I did yesterday from 7 Pillars of Wisdom by D.E. Lawrence, in which he describes being so tired that he broke into parts, and his parts, one of his parts was up above him looking down and blowing raspberries or whatever it was doing. But he was on his camel, and having ridden all night for 2 days, he was quite tired, and he felt himself breaking into parts, and all these different parts of him were interacting. So this is just like that. So
I think that picture, that Arzt holding the torch picture,
yes,
is such a wonderful gesture, because Arzt itself, herself, holding the torch, the flame has these parts that do this. But they're constantly doing that, but they never lose anything. That's one thing that's so mysterious about flames, is they're continuously giving, but they're always there. And it's so that whole parts piece, what's above, what's below, I mean, diminished, giving raspberries down, I mean, that whole thing, it's pretty mystical. Just to even, it's like candle gazing is a thing. I mean, people will watch a flame, and part of it is because it's continuously in motion, always leaving and never going. It's this whole mystery. I mean, if you really look at a flame, so that I think that golden bezel with Arzt holding the torch is quite a wonderful visual metaphor that Diane put in here.
Yeah, so the note on the book is gold ring with round bezel representing a torch-bearing Arzt, 4th century BC, Bibliothèque Nationale de France, Paris, photo by Marie Lanwin, 2008. That's quite an amazing piece of work for 400 BC.
Yeah, I mean that bezel, the golden bezel is just that's that's more than a crest. There's a whole metaphor of the unfolding of life just in eras holding a torch.
Right. Okay, I want to just read this poem again to set the stage. As you see me, I can fly, soaring around the room on parchment paper wings, old and yellowed, but light in flight, looking down on those who live without knowing this. As you see me, I can fly. And
Mm.
then the quote, Daikini or sky women can either mean space or sky. It also means womb, by implication, a space-like womb. Her spatial expanse is thus emptied and occupied, simultaneously vacant and fruitful. She has discovered her sky-like nature from Sultrim Alion, Women of Wisdom. Okay, now Diane's comment. Sky-like. Over the years, I have grown fond of my old and yellowed parchment paper wings, and I hoped I might find some reference to a psychological process so I could include it in the collection. Finally, one day I happened upon a quote about sky women, and especially liked the idea of being both emptied and occupied. I checked Wikipedia for the definition of Dakini and discovered her to be an important figure in Tibetan Buddhism, described as a female embodiment of enlightened energy. In the Tibetan language, Dakini is rendered Kandroma, which means she who traverses the sky or she who moves in space. Sometimes the term is translated poetically as sky dancer or sky walker. In this context, the sky or space indicates shunyata, emptiness, which is at the same time the pure potentiality of all possible manifestations. Sounds terrific, but I wonder, is this an authentic amplification of a self-serving piece or a self-serving piece of puffery? Notice the tidy but heady evidence of inflation, looking down on those who live without knowing this. I had hoped to rid myself of these flights of fancy, but Edinger counsels that it's difficult, if not impossible, to avoid inflation when you're touching highly numinous material. Here again, Jung offers the needed perspective. When the enlightened person remains what he is and is never more than his own limited ego before the one who dwells within him, whose form has no knowable boundaries, who encompasses him on all sides, fathomless as the abysms of the earth and vast as the sky. That's okay. Let me read that last
Yeah,
sentence.
that's
But
really
I want
that's
to
important.
put it in context. This sentence that Diane has quoted is literally the last sentence that appears in Answer to Job. It's on paragraph 758 of Jung's book, Answer to Job, and it's the very last sentence. And so let me read that again. Even the enlightened person remains what he is and is never more than his own limited ego. Never more than his own limited ego before the one who dwells within him, whose form has no knowable boundaries, who encompasses him on all sides, fathomless as the abysms of the earth and vast as the sky. And so there he's speaking of God or the self or the God image or the collective unconscious, depending on how you want to talk about it.
Well, and also there's you cannot exceed yourself. Even if you grow, you are now at a larger 100%. I mean, there's the concept of powerful limits, and those Job kind of answer to Job boundaries that this puts in place are always so ever important, just to simply say, I'm present.
Right. Okay, going on with Jerry Wright. I'm reading from A Mystical Path Less Traveled. And Jerry Wright, just for context, served as a Presbyterian minister for 25 years, and then later became a Jungian analyst. And this book was published in 2020. He just finished writing it the day after the election. So, journal. The current evangelical and political regression is a desperate attempt to preserve patriarchal religion and culture. Old, fearful white men are afraid of losing their power and privileges supposedly gifted to them by a white theistic father god. Religion is powerful since it links us with the supposed power attributed to the gods. Unconscious religion is deadly. We are tasked with imagining a different God image, one that is radically immanent rather than sitting beyond the clouds next to his only one and only son guarding the salvation gate. Neither will it suffice to give the old male God a pair of breasts rather than a penis. Our task is daunting, since nothing of great religion's cultural or political change will take place unless we embrace new images of God and religion. We are not required to complete the task in our lifetime, yet we are not permitted to ignore it. And
Yeah,
that's right.
That's a call to arms right there. I mean, and then it's an important one.
And it's right between the eyes, and it relates back to what Edinger said in the New God Image, or not Edinger said it, but he was quoting Jung again. And so I'm on page 187 of the New God Image, and here's what Jung said about the New God Image. In one paragraph, this is his letter to David Cox, which I've read on the YouTube channel, and you can find the playlist for the New God Image on this YouTube channel. But one paragraph is critical. Although all this sounds as if it were sort of a theological speculation, it is in reality modern man's perplexity expressed in symbolic terms. It is the problem I so often had to deal with in treating the neuroses of intelligent patients. It can be expressed in a more scientific psychological language. For instance, instead of using the term God, you say unconscious. Instead of Christ, self. Instead of incarnation, integration of the unconscious. Instead of salvation or redemption, individuation. Instead of crucifixion or sacrifice on the cross, realization of the four functions or of wholeness. I think it is no disadvantage to religious tradition if we can see how far it coincides with psychological experience. On the contrary, it seems to me a most welcome aid in understanding religious traditions. So if we look at the January 6th event as an eruption from the collective unconscious. The collective unconscious, based on this definition that Jung has given, is in fact God. I mean, he's saying explicitly that the collective unconscious is God. And if you think of it in that way, and that the individual unconscious is one's God image or one's image of God. And so if you think of it in that way, then you have a little piece of God within you, but you have to avoid allowing it to take over, but through narcissism and become an inflation, because then you think you're better than you are. And
Well, and I saw
where have we seen this recently? But
yeah,
let me
certainly.
just finish my thought here.
Yeah,
So
go ahead.
the point is that in the collective unconscious were and are many white men who feel left out or put upon by our government, by the financial authorities. I'm one of them. And because I lost my life savings to their behaviors. And so there is a lot of dissatisfaction in the collective unconscious. And what January 6th was actually an eruption of that. However, that does not change the fact of what the God image that is represented in the United States really is. That's a repressed part of the collective unconscious of the United States, but it is not the United States. And so we have to understand that tells us that's a symptom, a message to us about the psychic epidemic that has been going around in our country for the last especially 5 years, and it needs to be cured. And part of that curing is me going to the ice cream place again and having ice cream from the woman's business who sent 4 busloads of people from my area to the insurrection in Washington on January the 6th. Maybe after that happened, she might think twice about doing that again, I suppose. So the point is, we are not permitted to ignore it. We have to understand what's going on at the unconscious level. And
well, and on that day, on January 6th, when Debbie snuck you the note in class, so to speak, and everyone's, oh my God. And you were, I was, you were calmer than I was, but I didn't freak. I went, all right, not surprising, but don't expect the military to arrive. It's not gonna, can't stop to address every barking dog. And the more I thought about it, it was that eruption was just a gas pocket on the side of a volcano. And I think the military rightly just sat back. And I don't think they were slow to respond or didn't respond. I think they sat back and went, you got to let this blow over. That's like, you don't put toxic chemicals in and then send your people into the toxic chemicals. It felt like it just needed to kind of up and go. And how many moms were there with their sons going, yeah, I know you're going to protest, but here, take your coat, you'll get cold.
Yeah.
It's like, right. And then don't be late for dinner. It's like it was poignant. It was more important than I think than any of us let on, and at the same point, it was farcical. It was sacrilege, and it was also sacrilege to do that to the Capitol, and murderous. Yeah. And so I don't think it was bunch of teenage boys, so to speak, just making some trouble and just let them get out of the system. I think what happened there was an abject misdirection of a communication. Basically the enemy just outed itself.
Yep,
and showed how simple-minded and how farcical its tactics were. Right. And it was basically playing chess to our checkers to any military's chess. Right. I think the military just sat back with their arms crossed going, oh, wow. No, yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
not even worth rubber bullets.
right. And as I said on that day, when one individual had said he was worried about the army coming in support of the president
No,
at that time, I said, no, that's not going to happen.
no.
And
They like you said, they have an oath to the Constitution, not to the
right.
man. And
Right. And whether they mishandled it or not, of course they mishandled it at some level. Um, and part of that relates to the fact that we've kept the District of Columbia disenfranchised forever.
that's true.
And so the mayor of the District of Columbia couldn't call out the National Guard as any other state governor can. But keep in mind that the District of Columbia is larger than 7 states in terms of population and certainly deserves to be represented. And the issue is now before Congress again. And, and you know, the citizens of the District of Columbia, of which I was one for 10 years, deserve to have a voice in Congress that has a vote.
Yeah.
Some years ago, they allowed for a shadow representative, Eleanor Holmes Norton, to be in Congress and shadow senators, but they don't have a vote. And so that is an injustice that has to be corrected. But, and, you know, that's part of our national shadow too, and part of the repression that's gone on all these years.
That's a really good point. Actually, that our innermost sanctum, basically, DC is the well of the Senate of the nation.
Sure.
And in that scale, and they're not with us. They're not a state.
Well, and we have to remember that what Jerry said, that our religion is where we put our energy, and all Americans have put our energy into one, our national flag, our national anthem, our Washington, D.C. It's most people in the U.S. That can afford it have been to Washington to visit the sites at some point. And so we've all put energy into visiting Washington, or most of us have. And I lived in the city for 10 years, as I said. And, you know, while the District of Columbia has its warts, so does every state. And
Yeah.
and so you know, the founding fathers who created the District of Columbia didn't face today's issues, and so we need to make adjustments for today's issues. And so there's my, you know, how I would vote if I were in Congress. But the U.S. Congress has already voted, and they voted for statehood. And you know, the other place is at least Puerto Rico, because Puerto Rico is, for all intents and purposes, a state also. And the Puerto Ricans do pay taxes, and they are in every way just as American as all other Americans. And they too deserve representation, but that, I digress. So let's go back.
Well, and I think, yeah, but at the same time, I think, you know, Puerto Rico is kind of the new Hawaii. It's that there was a problem with how to incorporate a non-contiguous state, and America was pretty predominantly stuck on our parcel, so to speak. But then once Hawaii came in, the idea of non-contiguity came in, and Puerto Rico has been hanging out in that no man's land since then.
Right. And, it may interest some to know that after World War II, Japan wanted to become a state at one point.
That's true. That's true.
So Gander
Hawaii too.
Gander asks a question: without traveling down a conspiratorial rabbit hole, do you too believe that meddlesome forces wielded by some are at work manipulating people in a collision course with one another? One word answer, Jordan.
No.
You don't believe that there's conspiratorial meddlesome forces?
Well, other than the word nature, and it keeps us all in conflict, but I don't think that's I think that one word answer, and one word answer, I'd have to say yes. But at the same time, only because not going down a conspiratorial rabbit hole.
Yeah, well, I have to say yes, and that, but I agree with your point that it is nature. So we're never going to be rid of duality. Duality
Right.
is a part of life. So, okay, going to the next point, and this is right on point, probably hide and seek.
Yeah,
is the next topic.
Right to that comment. Yeah, exactly.
All right. So here's the poem. God hides, so we must seek. Sneaking in Moses's ark, sliding down Mother Teresa's rosary beads, staining the edges of the Bible red, looking out from a dog's eyes. Heavens, you were staring right at me. Why be found? The game would be over. Oh, there you are. What shall we play now? Very good.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's an image called Madonna with Cannon, detail from 1436 by John van Eyck, Netherlands, the York Project. Yeah, okay, thank you, Jordan. That's the image.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, while you were reading. That's
okay. So the quote from Edinger's Ego and Archetype is, psychological development in all its phases is a redemptive process. The goal is to redeem by conscious realization the hidden self, hidden in unconscious identification with the ego. That's the redemption that is sought. And unfortunately, people think, and I used to think, that our former president had a big ego, but actually he has a teeny weeny little ego, which
itsy bitsy little spider,
right?
It's like,
which hides behind this bluster. And as my father taught me, a hard-boiled egg is always yellow inside.
I love that statement. I love that statement.
And it's very obvious that you can see, clear signs of the man's cowardice throughout his life, going back to the Vietnam War, but right up through his presidency.
Well, an exercise I did with him with some clients was I had them watch him with the sound muted. And I said, don't listen to the word, watch him. Just watch him. And it is not a micro tell. There is a hurt little boy that is trying to push away and stop and grab. And they're just all these little mini gestures. They're not adult gestures. They are unactuated child. I don't want to insult toddlers to say that
right.
I really don't. I can say he was a 4-year-old tantrum throwing toddler, but no intent to insult 4-year-old toddlers. But if you turn the sound off and watch him, it within 5 seconds you'll go, oh wow, it's obvious. So if you cut his voice out and you just watch his body language, it is, and honestly, it's pitiful. and it's pathetic, but it's just so clear. And then it becomes pretty sad, except then you can't listen to him anymore.
What you can understand this very clearly if you go watch a movie called Florence Foster Jenkins, which has
Right.
Meryl Streep in it as Florence Foster Jenkins. And Florence Foster Jenkins was a woman who was born with a golden spoon in her mouth. And she gave money heavily to the Metropolitan Opera. And so everybody kept puffing her up, and she had the idea that she could be an opera singer, which she couldn't. She was quite terrible.
Atrocious, actually, yeah.
As an opera singer. However, everybody let her live in that fantasy land because she kept giving huge amounts of money to the Metropolitan Opera. And it got pushed up to the point where she actually did a debut at the Metropolitan Opera, and her husband went out and bought in 3,000 returning troops, troops returning from World War II, to listen to it and to fill the audience, which they did, but they were hooting and she thought they were cheering, but actually they were derisive, and
they were jeering, not cheering. Yeah.
And when he hid the reviews from her, but finally one of the reviews got through to her that she actually saw what one of the major reviewers said, and it wasn't kind. And she literally died almost immediately after that, because she couldn't stand the whatever it was, that her bubble being burst. But let me just add one other factoid here. The recording of her singing in her debut is actually the most popular recording at the gift shop of the Metropolitan Opera. Everybody wants to hear Florence Foster Jenkins, but not for those reasons.
Well, yeah, it's like everyone wants to see the Fool, and it's that dark comedy part of life. Of her. So yeah.
And the Big Cat says Trump is a flawed con man that somehow represented the archetypal hero image for 40% of Americans. Yeah, precisely.
No, that's a really good point.
Okay.
That is.
So did I read?
And actually, a flawed con man. How can you be wrong when you're tricking people? I mean, that's really down there.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, so you were reading 81.
Yeah,
hide and seek.
But I didn't read Diane's comment, correct?
No, you didn't. We stopped at Edinger.
Yeah, okay. So Diane's commentary, hide and seek. I had no intention of writing about God. In fact, in an earlier version, I deleted all such references. Let's not confuse things with references to God, I thought. But time and again, they reappeared, and I realized it wasn't up to me to censor what had evolved on its own. Jung was asked, but why do you want to call this thing God? He replied, why not? It was always called God. God hides, so we must seek. Tells me that the process of searching, a deep longing for what we lack, fuels the process of individuation. But what I seek has been staring right at me all along, which speaks to the reciprocal nature of the ego self-reflection. That is, seeing and being seen. Some cultures think of this as the eye of God. The reference to a child's game, hide and seek, calls to mind the biblical admonition, except ye be as children, ye cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. I never understood what that meant until I read Edinger's insightful portrayal of the childlike qualities of the psyche. The child signifies the young, underdeveloped aspects of the personality, that which is fresh, spontaneous, and not yet fixed in rigid patterns. Why be found? The game would be over. Reminds me there is no end game. Playing is the game. From a Jungian point of view, the game is to redeem by conscious realization the hidden self. This is not a passive game of the redemption of God through faith, but an active process of making conscious the great presence within to seek and find our own true self. And of course, the I appears in lots of icons, etc., and it appears on the U.S. $1 bill, among many other places in the U.S. history, and so the founding fathers knew this, and we've lost track of it, but we have to recover it. It seems to me.
Well, in a synchronous quote that I saw this week to this hide and seek piece was, God will arrive disguised as your life. And then in tandem with that, in times of trouble, remember the teacher is always silent during the test. So there's the whole God within and God as us each in both those quotes.
Right.
That is that hide and seek quality.
And the point is, which Jerry Wright gets at quite explicitly, is that everybody that has followed the scientific method knows that there's no God up there. There's no God down here. And the only God is within us. And we have to find that. Okay, that's why Jung talks about the God image, which is the self within you, and the collective unconscious as being God. And he says, why shouldn't I refer to it as God?
Right.
He says it's a perfectly good name, and it's always been referred to like that.
In that way, yeah.
And the fact that the Abrahamic religions have been selling an outside God watching over you, that's not the God that exists. The God that exists is something probably much more powerful than that original God, which is the unconscious of all of us mashed together, which is what is right and what is wrong.
There's the whole concept too. Don't believe everything you think, because a lot of what you think is what you've been told. And for example, me, who's like, I love language, but I before E, except after C, and neighbor and way, and all that. That's a farce, because you can make a joke of it of I before E, except after C is disproved by science.
Yeah.
The word science itself is the anomaly to that rule. So
Gander says, a book I'm reading right now relates to your topic well, Hidden in the Garden, in Einstein's unfinished symphony on the BBC. While dying, Einstein mentioned the God being both gardener and garden. And the big cat says, the eyes with which you will look back at God will be the same eyes with which God first looked at you, according to Meister Eckhart.
Right.
It is Richard Rohr. What I would say is that if you think God is going to get you across the goal line, you're wrong. It's the God within you that's going to get you across the goal line.
Well, it's a funny synchronicity. Yeah, it is a funny synchronicity. I think the quote I used where God will arrive disguised as your life, I think that's Richard Rohr. R-O-H-R. I so nice synchronicity there with Richard Rohr.
Yeah. Okay. So Jerry goes on. Last evening, I heard Jungian analyst and professor Dr. Fanny Brewster speak on the racial complex. When addressing our nation's history of slavery, she repeatedly referred to an African Holocaust. I had never heard that phrase. It has so much more power and pathos than the word slavery. Perhaps it has been used, yet my own racial complex, including my unconscious attitude of white privilege, has prevented me from hearing it. And boy, by synchronicity, the idea of Holocaust has come up just yesterday in the news when finally, after 100 years, an American president has recognized that the murder of the Armenians in 1915 by the Turks was a genocide. And there's no question that that was a genocide.
Right.
And my professor, I had a professor in law school whose name is Thomas Bergenthal. And Justice Bergenthal was the youngest human being to survive Auschwitz. He was liberated when he was 10 years old. And he dedicated his life to international protection of human rights thereafter. When I was in law school, when he was about 40, he was writing a textbook called The International Protection of Human Rights. And in that textbook, he wrote about the Armenian massacre. I remember it clearly. And he went on to the University of Texas from my law school, which was in Buffalo, New York, the State University of New York.
SUNY, right.
Yeah, but then he went to the Central American Court of Justice, and then finally Bill Clinton in 1992 appointed him to the International Court of Justice as the American Justice. And of course, he was an immigrant to the United States. He was a naturalized American, but he was the American Justice for about 10 years. And now he's still alive and does sometimes lecture at George Washington University. I have asked him to join our Wisdom Path colloquia, but he may be too old for that now. He's about, I would say he's about 85 now. But if you want to learn something about Thomas Bergenthal, you can look him up on Wikipedia. And he wrote a book. Many books have been written about him, but his first book was Lucky Child. And the reason he survived Auschwitz is that the people that were being taken to the gas chamber hid him and made him a witness. And so for 2 years, he was hidden by the people that were going to the gas chamber, and he managed to survive. Quite a story, but
well, it's a high honor, and it's also such a dense responsibility for anyone, much less someone who's age 6, age 7, age 8, age 9, age 10. I mean, and it's no wonder that his life was then so full after, because the amount of life that he witnessed taken, I hate to call it a gift, but at the same time, when he was selected, there's a chosen quality to, you must remember us.
Yeah.
And then that's them understanding, I'm going to die. And there is one of the most powerful connections between two human beings is when I'm going to die. And then I ask you, remember me, and you do. And that's quite a handshake. That's quite a handshake that he had.
Yeah. very definitely. And he was my major professor in law school. I took more courses from him than any other professor. And so time flies when you're having fun.
Oh my.
So
it's already okay.
I
was late,
I was personally yakking here since 8 this morning Eastern time. So I'm going to wrap up because I have to host Diane Croft this afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
So this book, The Unseen Partner by Diane Croft, I will tell you is a numinous book, and it really addresses the issues of individuation in the Jungian sense. I urge you to purchase it and keep it as part of your permanent library. I certainly intend to do that, and I intend to give it to my children for Christmas this year because of its great power. It came to me unannounced. It came to me in a brown paper wrapper from Diane, and I wasn't expecting it. And I opened it and I started to read, and then I was involved in helping with dinner. So I handed it to my mother-in-law and said, here, you might be interested in this. I saw that it was very powerful immediately. And I gave it to my mother-in-law, but she refused to give it back.
Right. I love that.
I had to wrestle it away from my mother-in-law in order to do this series, which we're going to continue with. There's, I guess we're about 55% through the book at this point.
I'm glad she graciously let it on loan to you. But something I noticed this morning, actually, that I hadn't noticed before, we start with the poem.
Yeah.
We have the picture.
Yeah.
We have the quote.
Right.
And we have the journal entry. And then I go back to that little bitty I called the double syzygy out that first day. But what really struck me this morning was the poem, the picture, the quote, the journal entry. Each one speaks to a drawing, quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4. Mm-hmm. And each week, I'm going to start to watch which one applies to which, because I've got, quadrant 3 down here on the bottom left. It's the creative wellspring. Mm-hmm. Well, sometimes that's the poem, but sometimes that's the hide and seek part. And sometimes that's the picture. And so it's interesting. I just noticed the 4 part, 2 pairs, 1 pair on the left side, the poem and the picture, and 1 pair on the right side, the quote and the text. And that goes back to that little squiggle diagram of the double syzygy that she has. And it's just so, I don't know if I've architecturally seen something so tidy that's not rigid, because it's so just balanced. It's not symmetrical, it's just balanced. And I think just as an overview, it just struck me this morning that look at this symmetry, except it's what I call educated symmetry. It's a different thing on the other side of the axis in the same place, like a male and a female. Yeah. And the poem and the image and the quote and the text, it's just such an educated symmetry of balance. So I just wanted to kind of sneak hide and seek that in there, because it just felt like, wow, I didn't even see, we're on page 80. I didn't even feel the structure until now. And me, the former architect, is like, well, that's the first thing I see. I mean, and then I just wandered in like I'm in a sandbox. And then today I went, oh, I see where I am. So anyway, that was a cool balance to see between those 4 parts on each opposing page.
Right. So okay. So today we're going to have Diane Croft live. I repeat unto you who are on YouTube. I've put the link again on the YouTube chat for the 3rd time because this is going to be an important session. And so, Danny, I hope you will join us at that time. Danny Ben Heck, I see you there. And it will be live. It will be only on Zoom. There will be no YouTube live stream of this session. And so if you want to be a part of it, you have to join this afternoon. I will probably be online about 1:30 or a little after U.S. Eastern time, but Diane will begin at 2 p.m. And it will be a once and done. And part of that, although I have arm wrestled Diane for months on this topic, I do understand her perspective, which is that her talk is quite numinous. And in order to preserve the numen, she must keep it live. And if we just say, oh, well, that's nothing but another one of Skip's videos, then the numinosity is gone from it. And so I urge you to come and hear what Diane has to say, which is experiences of God in the individuation process today at 2 p.m.
And I thought about that, and the more I thought about it, I respect her statement where it will occur wise in time, in its life, in its moment, but it will not live on as an echo. And so I think clearly heard her intent in, I want you to hear this. I don't want you to hear it down the grapevine. And, echo, 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 echo. And I could go either way. And it's her decision, honestly, like you said. But it's interesting to me that it does beg the point of lineage versus echo.
Yeah, it occurs to me that I may do an interview with Diane, either only with me or as a separate live stream that doesn't involve her presentation.
Right.
Because today she's going to talk about her actual experiences of God. And I've had plenty of those. I have them every day. I had one on this session, in fact. When we were talking about the genocide and the fact that genocide is mentioned here by Jerry, and the president for the first time acknowledged the Armenian genocide.
Right.
And that is a part of my life. The human rights part of it is definitely a part of my life, and touched me quite deeply, because when I was in law school, Tom would wear short sleeve shirts pointedly so that people would see his tattoo, so that we would remember, and I do remember. And it's actually impolite of me to refer to him as Tom. I saw him as a friend in my law school days, but he's Mr. Justice Thomas Bergenthal from the International Court of Justice. And so we'll see you this afternoon. And I hope you all join us, and we'll see where I get with Diane after the event. We may do another one. Peace.